Welcome, welcome. My name is Aoife and I'm a mind body coach. And today I have with me Jochen, who is a short moments trainer amongst many other wonderful things. And I'm super, super excited to have him here today to share so many magical things with you. So first of all, I met this short moments training over 10 years ago. And it's the short moments training. It's not exactly mind body, but it's not mind body. And when I met the training myself over 10 years ago, it really did, it changed my life profoundly, all areas of my life. And over the years, it has filled my life with a tremendous amount of compassion and wisdom and generosity. And I certainly just would not be able to do what I'm doing today if I didn't have all that training and all this ongoing support. So I am so grateful and so passionate about this short moments training, which I'm going to hand over to Jochen to explain to you.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I am equally passionate about the training. Maybe just to share a little bit with wonderful people who are listening. I've always been really super curious and interested in the power of the mind, like the mystery and the power of the mind. And both, I just saw in my own experience, even growing up, that there is so much damage that can happen. Like I can ruminate, I can have sleepless nights even as a kid, because it just would, that negative voice would just not stop talking. And on the other hand, there was like moments that I couldn't even describe or explain, where the mind seemed like a real, like an ally, something I could rely on to solve problems, to be inspired by, to be happy, to help other people. But the problem was, it was kind of unpredictable when it was in which mode. So I wanted to figure this out, not just for myself, but because I had an intuitive sense kind of that people around me also hadn't figured that out. So wouldn't it be great if there was a solution to that? So having grown up in a small village in Germany, the only place I thought where you can learn about the mind was at university. So I enrolled into a psychology master's program, which I completed. And of course, I learned like interesting things. And some of it, I would say, was helpful, but a lot of it was like very scientific, and it was often focused on the illnesses of clinical things, but it wouldn't really give me a roadmap to flourishing or to thriving. The things I found most interesting were therapy approaches like Gestalt therapy that were like a bit out there. But I found them most compelling because they reflected kind of the wholeness, the completeness that I had, in like that sense that there was something in me that is indestructible, but I didn't know what that was. So I also did 2 therapies myself. I had 2 great therapists, and it really helped me, you could say, to make life more manageable. My relationships were more, yeah, just manageable, really. Like from being like I don't know, an angry teenager, I became a nicely adapted adult, I would say. You know, I could have like conversations without blowing my top, or just be in relationship in a way that wasn't damaging or something. But I still didn't feel that it was coming from that place of, you just mentioned wisdom, compassion. And I wanted to find that, so that life isn't just manageable, but that there can be like an unleashing of that love, of that warmth that I sometimes felt and sometimes didn't. So I expanded my horizon, really, and first looked at things like yoga and Tai Chi, just practices, not like more learning, but like practices that would bring me into my body. And then I found a book on Buddhist psychology, which I found like very interesting and compelling, but it was so complex and complicated. Like, if anybody here is familiar with Buddhist psychology, they've investigated the mind for thousands of years. So they know a lot, but it's also like shrouded in cultural overlays that I had no understanding of. So I read this book and I knew it had like amazing wisdom in it, but I didn't know what to do with it or how to access that. And so at some point, my wife was at a similar place in her inquiry. I met her when we studied psychology, and so we thought to take a sabbatical and just travel the world and look. Somebody anywhere, somewhere must have figured this out on how to make the mind more usable, more beneficial, how to open the heart in a really like ongoing, reliable way. And so we meditated a lot. We did a lot of practices. We dove into like really esoteric stuff. And um, the biggest problem I came across with these things is that I had experiences that were really nice, but I couldn't stabilize them. So the integration of what I had like maybe tapped my toe in through these practices, it was really hard to bring that, say, when I call my parents and they would tell me things on the phone that typically would push my buttons, that would still push my button, and I didn't know what to do. And the practice that I had tried, it just wasn't accessible to me at the time. So I kept looking, or we kept looking, and it was then when we found the short moments practice that things really clicked into me, clicked in for me in a way that made so much sense. It clarified so much of my experience. Um, and it also really illuminated what I had glimpsed in these more esoteric practices and in the Buddhist psychology book that I had found before, but in a really simple, practical way that my like analytical Western mind could relate to, and that didn't feel like I needed to believe in anything. I could just investigate my own experience. Yeah, so that was just maybe to recap how I came across the teaching. And really, in essence, it really is all about um, better understanding how our mind operates and really what the nature of the mind is. And these two terms, like the dynamic of the mind and also the nature of the mind, are, I don't know how deep you want to dive into this here, but these are two aspects that are really so crucial, I feel, for anybody who is interested in this topic.
Oh my God, yes, I love this. I have heard the training be called an education in the nature of mind.
Right,
So, and that just for me is something that I was always seeking growing up. Even as a very, very small child, I remember this is something I really, really wanted to know about. I didn't really care about academics. I didn't really care about many things, but I knew I really, really wanted to know um what was going on really in a heartfelt, compassionate way. I knew
right,
um, so yeah, the education in the nature of mind, and it was something that was not available to me at all through the schooling system, through any of my caretakers, really. But for me, you know, my parents really, I grew up in a very densely multicultural part of London, and there was all kinds of religions, and my parents were super, super open, and they always exposed us to like every kind of religion, and there was just this openness. And they also had a lot of the Dalai Lama's teachings, and they would go
mm,
and see the Dalai Lama. And my mom actually had a friend from one of her best friends from university was an Irish woman who uh, left Ireland in her mid-20s, and she went to Japan and became a monk. And she ended up dying quite young, but she was given the name after she died by the monks, the Buddhist monks. I forget what the name was, but she was called the Buddhist Saint of Compassion. So
Mm,
for me, I was fortunate. I even though I didn't have exactly what I was looking for, I definitely the kind of like seeds were planted
yeah.
to lead me there. But for me, when I got to, I think I was about 25 years old when I met. I'd actually met the training before. One of my best friends had, she would always tell me about it because we would be partying and we'd be staying up all night. And the two of us would always end up chatting, and she would be telling me all about this training, this like short moments, this education in nature mind. This, she always talked about this stability. Um, and I was intrigued, but it wasn't until I completely had like probably my first big melt, like breakdown, like I couldn't actually go on. And I had done a huge amount of therapy already and spiritual seeking through different kinds of methods. But I remember just logging on to the website and listening to a talk by one of the trainers, and I just felt this familiarity, kind of like, I think you were touching on that. You were like, it it was not, yeah, it was just this sense of familiarity, and to be honest, it was just such a relief. I felt like um it was very loving. I felt the warmth. I felt
Mm,
the warmth. I felt the humility of everyone who shared, like the trainers and any participants who were sharing. There was a huge amount of humility and openness. And this, I just melted. I was like, just take me away. This is where I want to be, with people who are sharing so openly with such humility. And like, although that didn't, through the years of doing the training, it didn't heal my body and my pain, but there was just this warmth, this refuge, and this huge amount of resilience. So when I fast forward years later, when I was again at a place of breaking point, when I was like facing all kinds of things, like there was some really unpleasant experiences with the medical system, with the psychiatric system, and people were really questioning my sanity, let's just say. I had this real stable, solid ground, and I was, no matter how like wild the display of my mind and body were, I had this like clarity, and I had this resilience, and I had this capacity and this resource to always draw upon.
mhm.
And so I know how much this training has kind of carried me through all those moments, and then helped me then with the the with the mind body part of things.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it really is, even though our life experience is different, I think the underlying essence of what you were sharing is exactly what I found as well. So even though like psychology had helped me, as I mentioned before, to find relationships more like manageable, and like I could live life, but there was something like a ground that was missing. Like it was like I learned swimming on an open ocean, and that's helpful to not drown, but it still feels like scary, and I was in this constant mode of managing, which is very exhausting. Um, and so to discover the nature of mind, and we can talk about that more in a moment, but to discover the nature of mind is exactly finding that ground in every moment of my life, and recognizing that I went through life not knowing this about myself, which is crazy. But I mean, everybody should learn this about ourselves in school. This should be the first thing we teach our kids, because we stuff all this information into these minds, and we don't tell them anything about the nature of this mind, which is like the basis for processing all the information, for making sense of everything we're learning. for getting in touch, for being in alignment with our own like wellspring of wisdom and compassion. And so I'm not against like sharing information in schools, but this other aspect of like how to tap into this resource, as you just called it, that can give so much stability amidst everything. It's insane that we're not offering more of that education to our children and to everybody, really. And maybe just to share, in case people are wondering, so the distinction there when we speak about the nature of mind and the maybe dynamic of mind, or the information, there, in principle, from my experience, for example, in meditation or in other practices, they're typically, and I'm not saying this for everybody's practice, but typically what we're learning is that if we do certain practices, whether that's therapy or certain like maybe mindfulness practices or yoga, or many of these things I have done and still do, so I'm not against any of them, but usually we're doing them expecting that the content of our mind will change. So I feel horrible, let's meditate, or let's drink, let's have sex, let's eat, let's, do anything so that the horrible thoughts just stop. And sometimes that works. Like I can eat a chocolate cake and feel better, but typically an hour after the chocolate cake and the sugar crash comes, I feel even worse. I feel worse for having broken my diet, and the same stuff still continues to bother me. So while there is some some benefit to these kinds of approaches that change the content of our mind, there is another way to approach, for example, meditation, where the focus isn't on changing the content of our mind, but for recognizing what's aware of that content. So there is the nature of mind that is a luminous clarity, what's looking through your eyes right now. Or if you're listening to this, what's listening to this? And this is not an inquiry to answer with like your textbook knowledge. So don't say my brain is listening. Oh, you could say that, but that isn't the point of the question. The question is to look in your direct experience. What are you finding when you look at what's looking? When you look at who's thinking your thoughts? And it's a really interesting question, because we really don't know. We know nothing about this. But when we actually do this and reflect in our direct experience, we find that all we can really say is there is awareness. There is a bare cognizance and intelligence that's aware, like a mirror in which countless images appear, that the mirror itself, that stainless reflection, the capacity to reflect, is always present. So the nature of mind really is that clarity, that awareness, that cognizance, that intelligence. And when we become acquainted with that faculty itself, we find exactly what you mentioned before, like that resilience, because we can see the content of our mind keeps changing. And if we try to corral that to only be one type of experience, say positive experience, it's first of all an endless, exhausting process. And second, it never works in a long-lasting way. We may have temporary success, that reflecting on my experience, even when it was successful, I knew it would, it would go. So there was always this like bittersweet moment, say in romance or in enjoying something, that I always knew this is going to go away. So that always brought this like melancholy, or is that the right pronunciation? Melancholy, into these nice moments. And with this presence of that clarity, of that awareness, of intelligence, I just found there is so much more ease in all experience. Like I can let the negative stuff just be there and like flow through my system without fighting it. And as I do, like paradoxically, it no longer hangs around. It just like goes through, and that's that. And then the next experience comes. So I know that this is also sometimes taught. I have done meditation practices that were trying to teach that as like a practice, just like be equanimous. But I didn't know how to do that because I didn't want the negative stuff around. So it was like trying to accept something that I didn't like, and I don't want to accept it. It's like making a peace treaty with the enemy I deeply hate. And I make the peace treaty so that I don't die, but I'm not really at peace with them. And so it was the same with these negative experiences I've had. But then in recognizing this, the nature of mind, that mirror in which everything appears and resolves, I could see I actually don't have to fight all that stuff that comes and goes without me doing anything. I can relax, I can rest as that open, spacious awareness itself. And in that, find all the things that I had tried to arrive at through all these other practices, which is really amazing to find that what I've been looking for has been here all along. But I didn't know that. And that's why I kept looking for it everywhere, like that indestructible essence, as I shared before. I knew it's there, but I didn't know where to look or how to look or how to find it. So I thought I had to sit for 10,000 hours or maybe be reborn as like a bodhisattva in my next life, or I was looking everywhere for an explanation for this. And so that's what I found in the Short Moments teaching, is like an introduction to what this really is, and to have like a simple method that I could rely on to keep bringing me back to that experience of resting as the nature of mind, instead of getting lost in the constantly changing content of my mind.
I love that so much. And I think this training is just really, it's really great when you maybe you don't like meditating, or you find that hard, or you like simple things. Like, this is just me. I don't find it easy to sit around and meditate. Like, some people might find that very like a great practice. Um, and it's like the actionability. I love this is what I also found when I came to the mind body. So, but it's the same with this short moments training for me. It was like I could intellectually understand so much, but then the actionability, having this tool where you could just kind of like bring a sense of meditation, if you will, into like wherever you are in any moment. Then you don't need any like books or journals, or you don't need any tools or anything around you. You have that. And I love, over the years of listening to all the trainers speak, I've heard a few times it being described as like a great retirement, like kind of retiring from all the efforting of trying to organize the mind in a way that is going to be like peaceful or calm or happy, whatever your preference. I think everyone just has an arbitrary preference to how they would like their mind to be organized. Um, and I guess mine would have been peace for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Peace, love, and harmony, or something like that. Um, but yeah, and you have it on the go wherever you are. So yeah, so many things. But then the amazing thing also about that for me was to, from that place of like retirement, let's say, like retired from trying to organize my mind, and then just like really gaining an experience in what this nature of mind is, this basis, this like resting from that place. Then I can decide if I do want to change something. So
Right.
this was like my big deal when I first found the mind body teaching. And it was like changing things, especially like pain patterns, like actual sensations, changing them, changing beliefs. And I was like getting into like just always trying to like kind of debate with my personal trainer, short moments trainer. And she was just, for over the years and years and years of having these short moments trainers, I've always been met with absolute love, no matter what I have brought to the table. But she was really guiding me to see that when I was able to rest in that kind of place of clarity, then I could take action from there. And 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 that felt a lot more compassionate and um and easy to do, and more natural actually, than trying to like trying to control it all before. So for
Mhm.
me, that was just, yeah, it was a real breakthrough to just have these both of these trainings really like work well together. And the more I do this mind body work and talk with all the mind body doctors, every single time what comes through is compassion,
Mm,
having more compassion for yourself, and finding a stable basis amidst whatever sensations are arising, to a point that they can move through, and that we don't get like latched onto them, or continue into a spiraling story about them. So yeah, the compassion part is really big for me.
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think when I when I really look deeply into my own motivation, it really is that as well. Like there is in my experience, it's so natural that the more we settle into this space, you could say, of clarity and intelligence and love, really, there is just such a wish to I don't know, benefit and support and share and like love people up, and um including myself. That is one of like I it was usually much easier for me to try, at least try and be nice to others, but I was always so hard on myself and so competitive with myself. And so to really also like pacify that constantly self-critiquing undermutter, like that voice that would always tell me you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you should have been over this, like why can't you do that, and this is so it's just like incessant, these like that voice in our head. And to like, even for that voice to feel compassion and to know, this is like the stuff that I have learned, that like countless people right now are so bogged down by this voice. It explains the conflicts both like people carry around within ourselves, but also that we experience in our relationships with our loved ones. You can like look at politics and you can see like it's all like we're basically just little kids feeling all these feelings that we don't know what to do with. Like just imagine if all the leaders in the world would just rest as that space of warmth, love, and compassion. Um, and I know it sounds like a fantasy, but having seen the transformation both in myself and in people we've been, working with, it is not just a la la land kind of, you know, let's make the world a better place. There is so much clarity and insight and discernment. Like you said, you can really see with that clarity which mountain to climb, what to focus on, what to do, and also really why you're doing it. Like, is this reactive, and or is this really something that's coming forth from this ground of our being? And every time something comes from that place for me, I usually also find the tools to then enact it and to express that in some way, shape, or form. um, it's also with the mind body work that you've been doing. I think I wrote that to you in an email a while ago, but I read one of the books there, and And I was so fascinated by this work because it makes so much sense to me. Like, makes so much sense to me, both in, I've always been fascinated by the placebo effect because, typically it's seen as like something bad that messes up studies. But to me, it's the most important discovery in all these studies because it shows the healing power of our mind. And so I always thought if we could harness that power of the mind for these illnesses, whichever they are, it doesn't mean we only do that. It's great that medicine has made so many advances, but this what usually is considered like a confounding variable that can't be that should be like taken out of the equation. I think it's the most important discovery amongst all these studies. And so the work you do, I think, is so beautiful in really utilizing and like sharpening the power of the mind to bring so much healing to chronic pain and to like lots of other things as well. In my case, it was so benign compared to others. I just had RSI from typing too much. And I began to just worry about it because I saw people around me who couldn't work any longer, and then they had to like do all kinds of other things or change jobs. And I thought maybe I really need to do something with this. And the more I did, the worse it got. It's because I was so obsessed with it, and I was looking all the time, like, are they hurting? Is it this? Is it that? And I tried the balls and the massage and the different mouths and using my left arm, and then my left arm started hurting. And I thought, this is crazy. This is like, this is impossible. There must be a solution to this. And that's when I came across this approach, and it so resonates with the essence of what I had learned in my direct experience through the short moments teaching, where it is so much really is it depends on how we relate to the information we keep processing on a daily basis and what we're holding from the past, and how we deal with all of that. So kudos to you for really bringing the two together in your direct experience, and I'm sure in how you embody your approach as well.
Thank you, Jochen. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so cool, and so glad you found the mind body teaching, and you can see then, how these things just spiral. Yeah, for me, it was all kinds of symptoms from a really young age, and it was the obsession and the different bits of information that you get from well-meaning like doctors or practitioners, and someone tells you this, another person tells you this, and you're just following down all these different rabbit holes, but
Mm,
none of them are they're all providing more actually more stress.
hmm
I used to, because I was diagnosed as mystery girl as a child, and I had all these mystery illnesses. I was like gunning for a diagnosis. I was like, the day I have a diagnosis where someone can say, I have this word to say to relate, to tell people why I am the way I am. And I thought there would be a freedom in that. And then I would find a whole community who have like overcome it or whatever. And then I started to get diagnosis, IBS, fibromyalgia, and I just found communities of people who were absolutely out of their mind, way worse down the line. And the diagnosis itself, yeah, it actually just came with a heavy another layer of a heavy load. So
mm,
when I definitely think, because of all the training I'd done in the nature of mind and compassion, the minute I heard, like the first 2 minutes I heard from the doctors who were teaching about the mind body practice, it absolutely resonated in all of my cells, and it just made total sense. But I also think that because these doctors, and I've been going to doctors my whole entire life, my dad's a doctor, right?
mm,
And there was something that these doctors were speaking from with such humility. This was really familiar to me from this short moments training. They were really speaking with a huge amount of humility, and they were sharing their own direct experience. when they had stressful periods in their lives, when they had kids, when they were getting promotions, and that they were getting different symptoms in their bodies. And I could feel that the compassion in them, because they had to bring that compassion into their own lives. And it really, really, I just knew from that minute on, I knew to throw everything into this. And for me, it was also my strengths. It was clearly my strengths, gifts, and talents, which is also a part of training up in the education in the nature of mind, is when you kind of clear away all the crap of like trying to organize all the crap you collected over the years, and all the ways you think you should be acting and behaving and thinking and participating, and you really start to see what your strengths, gifts, and talents are, that really light you up and bring you joy, and they are this great contribution to the world. And it's also a huge part of the mind body journey. Also, when I work with clients, it's not the intended result, but usually they start to realize their passions and interests, because you're clearing out the crap. But
Mhm.
but but yeah, so do you want to share a little bit about that, about like strengths, gifts, and talents, and about um
Clearing out the crap.
like clearing out the crap? Exactly. Great topic.
Yeah, both, I think. Yeah, this is such a great topic. Clearing out the crap. When I came to the short moments teaching, I had already gone through 2 therapies. I'd studied psychology, and I've also done some continued education in systemic coaching, and my wife is a systemic relationship and family therapist, and they had to bring their spouses to some of the trainings there. So I had gone through that as well. So I had done a lot of work on myself. So I knew the crap, to just keep using this word. And I'll just bring another angle on that in a moment, but just to pick that up. I knew a lot of stuff that was there. But what I had essentially learned was to live with it without, but not really resolving it. And there is a big difference between those two. Like, especially when we're talking about like the source of these like illnesses that you've shared, that you have been struggling with for your entire life. Because if you just manage something and it still has its own life, like in your body, it's like other stuff we have in our body that just keeps on doing its thing until you found a real treatment for it. And so when I came to the teaching, the first step that you really learn is to rest as that nature of mind without doing anything with anything. So you're retiring, as you mentioned, from sorting out your stuff. And you also learn to see all the stuff from that vantage of that indestructible clarity. And a lot of things, in my experience, just by recognizing them from this different angle, not from an angle of like this fragile being that like is afraid of all this stuff and feels at the whim of it, but from looking at it from like the mountaintop and really looking at everything, I could see so many like challenges, patterns in relationships. They just truly resolved without me even doing anything, just by continuing to rest and relax in the face of it. It's like one meditation practice I focused on a lot before. The aim was to like decondition your system, but I didn't. Again, I didn't feel I had the right tool for it because my system kept reacting. And then I thought, oh my God, I just created another moment of conditioning. So I made myself feel worse often because I felt I've just increased my negative karma. And so, but from this vaster perspective, I could allow the things to surface and resolve. And that is ultimately exactly what I've been trying to do with the meditation practice, but it was so hard. And somehow, miraculously, having a different vantage allowed this process to basically do itself. What that led me to was when that job of managing my experience became less and less of like a time consuming thing, I had more space, more mind space to check in with myself. What actually am I here to do? Like, if it's no longer my responsibility to sort out my thoughts, to be a nice person, to, be a good son, to be a good husband, and to do all these other things, what am I going to do with this life? And I had inklings of that, but typically what would be in the way were fears, worries, like imposter syndrome. And I still have all of those, just to like be super transparent. Like, I still often think, who am I to talk? Or I feel like a 15-year-old, even though I've turned 50 this year. It's like so unpredictable still what comes to my mind, but it does no longer limit me. I feel that I can be aligned with my purpose. That to me is even more like juicy than the strengths, gifts, and talents, because the purpose is really what gives me like endless fuel, it feels, and energy to do what I love doing. And somehow just resting and being grounded in that purpose, in that mission. You mentioned compassion before. It activates, again, I don't want to make this too mysterious, but it feels like miraculously or almost magically it activates the qualities and activities, the strengths, gifts, and talents that are needed to embody, to enact that deeper purpose. So in my experience, like I didn't do strength finding courses, and they're perfectly fine to do. So if anybody wants to do this, I can only encourage you to explore this. But for me, the greatest exploration was, you could say, an inside job, and to really listen, what is it that I'm really here to do? And then I realized the bigger question for me is even, who am I here to be? Because if I rest in this being, in the essence of my being, the doing can come from there, and it doesn't need any energy. It doesn't need any contrivance. I can just be without having to constantly think about it. So it kind of activated these passions and strengths, gifts, and talents quite instinctively or automatically.
I love that so much. And it's such a huge part, like finding your purpose doesn't have to be like this big like career path where you're gonna go like make $1 million or whatever. It's like finding, like, yeah, like you said, just it can be so simple, like who do I want to be, or who am I here to be. And for me, like I just spend so much time with my granny, and I get that feeling very much like serving grannies and babies are my favorite people. So I always get that sense of purpose when I'm with them. Um, but yeah, something you touched on is so funny because I always had like a massive public speaking, like allergy, like I just couldn't do it. And I felt just it was impossible. Like I'm telling you, it was impossible. No amount of therapy, hypnosis, loads of hypnosis, and I also was uh, doing like Toastmasters and all these different things, and it was impossible. And then just through like going along with taking my short moments, taking the support, clearing out the crap, finding my purpose, and being so lit up by this urge to serve and to do what I just felt like I was really here to do, I was just talking. And it wasn't like you said, it wasn't like I still had imposter syndrome. I was still embarrassed. I was still shaking. I was still all the things that used to stop me
Mm.
from talking at all. And not just in public spaces, but in like small groups of people. And I was really affected by it. I was trying to like heal this like social anxiety and all these things. And it was just like, it just came out of me. I just had to speak. And I just had to speak with other people who were speaking
Mm,
like this, and I just had to share. And for sure, I lost sleep and felt embarrassed and never felt like, all the thoughts were still there, but it was giving me a real life to
yeah.
to be engaged and stimulated in that way that I felt like I was contributing, and
Hmm.
just what I was, and for people who are recovering from chronic pain and illness, rebuilding your life and re-engaging back into society, actually, very basically, when you spend so long on your own in your room,
Mm,
not doing the, ordinary day-to-day things. It's like re-engaging back into society and finding your like identity as well. um is just a massive, massive, massive part of that kind of recovery or healing process. So yeah, there's so many different ways to like clear out the crap and really get um get connected with your passion, your purpose, your gifts. So yeah, I definitely
mm,
have gained that from the short moments training and the mind body teaching as well.
yeah. And I'd love to hear your experience, but for me, it was really interesting that um, it was and continues to be, especially those negative experiences that have been the most empowering for me. That's why I was like putting the quotation marks around clearing out the crap before, because, well, let me tell you a little story about that. I remember when I did the first course in the short moments approach. Candace Siche Rinpoche at the time was hosting the training herself, and I went through the course and I was flying and I felt great. And somewhere on day 10 or something, things started to crumble, and the depression that I had battled, and it's not a clinical depression that I battled, but like really dark thoughts. Like I wasn't like suicidal or anything, but it felt really dark. And I thought, oh no, I've lost it again. Like, what should I do with this? And then I thought, okay, I'll ask her. Like, and just went up and asked her, how should I deal with this? And like, why is this coming back? I thought I had overcome this. And then she has this sweet, you mentioned grandmother, and she, to me, she has this like beautiful energy that I just felt like I could tell her everything. And she just sat me down and she said, let me tell you a story of the Buddha. She said, when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he didn't just sit there for his own sake when he faced all the, and then all his negative emotions. Like typically they're depicted as demons and things, but they're probably just like his negative emotions and thoughts and beliefs. He didn't just face them for himself, he wanted to relieve all beings from suffering. So when you're facing, now having been introduced to this nature of mind and to the source of compassion, know that you're not only facing this as your own struggle, but as something that you can share with all beings for the rest of your life. So any glimmer of light you're finding, anything that is a little brighter than it used to be, is something that can spark another one's light in their journey. So this dramatic, I mean, I came out feeling like a superhero after a 5 minute conversation where I entered like completely broken down, and then I came out and I felt like, this is amazing, give me more negative emotions, because then I can share more with the world. And that's really what I've found, is that all the stuff that I've been fighting with for all my life, whether it's about me or relationship stuff, those are usually the things I can help others with the most, because it's my own direct experience. And I know how it feels to like feel depressed. I know how it feels to not be confident. I know how it feels to not get the acknowledgement that we always want from other people, from our parents. I just know so many nuances of being in relationships that don't feel fulfilling, and you don't know how to do it because I've been there. And having gone through this transition in how I relate with my own experience, I can then support other people because I've taken the same journey. So to me, a lot of the things that I just had in mind as we spoke about clearing out the crap, they really are a gold mine of benefit from that perspective. Like if you hadn't struggled all your life, not that I would want that for anybody, but it made you into who you are today to give everything that you can give. So your greatest struggles become your greatest both inspiration and fuel, and later on, your greatest stories that you can share. Because otherwise, they could read a book or do a course, but it's so different when you speak with somebody who's gone through the same struggle. So I really feel that for us working in this, kind of field, the more negative our life was, like the more negative emotions we have experienced, the greater the wisdom and compassion we can then share because we've gone through it.
I love that so much, and it's such a truth for me, and it is also part of the mind body journey. It's where you really, it's like you flip the script, but you just
Mm,
see your experience. You don't change it, so it's not like you like fakely positive your past into something that it's not, but you really see. And there's Dr. Dave Clark, this really sweet mind body doctor in America. I did a talk with him, and he wrote a book in 1983, and he's been working with clients for years. And he always tells his clients that they're a hero. He writes down and he says, like, Jochen is a hero. He writes it down and he hands it. And it's really like you said, you felt like a superhero. It's like something that, and because people, especially when they're experiencing such an extreme amount of pain and suffering, physical illness, it's compounded by shame. Then
mm,
compounded by shame, you're broken, your life's ruined, like your burden, you're ruining everyone else's lives, everyone's upset, it just goes on and on and on, and it's a very sticky mess that you feel like you're under. And so really starting to see the truth
mm,
from a different vantage, that for me is how I found resolving the past so much more effective than any of the other kind of like trauma work and different kinds of
mm,
tools that I was using. When it was simpler. I'm all about the easier, simpler ones, but it's just like a shifting, continuing to practice, like shifting the vantage,
mhm.
and then really seeing then the gold mine and the benefit that's available there. And that really, really, really is a part of the mind body healing too.
Yeah, amazing.
So many.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I won't take too much more of your time, but I wanted to leave some links in the comments for anyone who wanted to be in touch with Jochen. He does professional coaching, and then there are the inner peace and harmonious relationships work also. And then there'll be a link to book a call with you also. So do you want to share anything more about how you work, or anyone who wants to get in touch?
Um, I'm just really open for like anything that people want to bring to a call with me. I think the people I love working with the most are people who, like, by a conversation like this, are inspired to discover the nature of mind for themselves. And many of the people I work with, whether that's in professional, like leadership development or executive coaching, or more on the relationship or the spiritual side, typically people have had practices. Again, it's like my own experience. I have had practices, I've tried many things, but there is like this missing piece. And it's about integration of that nature of mind into every moment of life. And then for some people, the focus will be more their, you could say, inner peace and fulfillment, which is what I initially was looking for. And then for others, it's more about embodying that also in a professional way, like when they're leading their teams or when they're building a company or any of these like outwardly oriented, you could say, endeavors. The discovering the nature of mind really is the foundation for anything that we want to do in our life. So it then just depends. So the link that you'll post there about the professional coaching is the coaching and consulting work that I do. And the other aspect is more the spiritual and relationship harmonization work that we do with the Short Moments organization. And if someone listening or watching doesn't know which bucket to go to, then just book a call and we'll talk about it.
I love that. Yeah, so if any of this resonated with you and you're drawn to connect with Jochen, I really recommend that you do. Just being in contact with Jochen has really just, it just, again, just fills me with so much warmth and compassion. And I feel very I feel like I have more confidence just by your presence. So I'm really grateful for you in my life and everything that you share, Jochen. Um, so yeah,
Thank you so much, Aoife. That's yeah, it's an honor and a great joy.
great. Okay, so we'll leave it there and I will see you again.
Take care.